Hello everyone, Doug Hansgate here on Transform Tuesdays. And today I thought I'd take a little bit more of a philosophical approach to editing and show you some of the reasons that we have things like luminosity range and Lightroom available to us and where they came from. This may get a little deep into the woods for some people, but I promise you if you hang with me, this will start to make a whole lot more sense, especially if you're one of those logical people that just says, just show me why and how. Then I will suggest that this might be a benefit for you. So I have this image, and I have it in a workspace that is very generic. It's just my photography workspace in Photoshop. And I brought it here first because I wanted to kind of show you a couple of things. One, the power of curves and why we would use them. So if I were to just go ahead and say, look, let's apply a curve to this image. Now this is a curves adjustment layer. And I probably should, I just hit Command Z or Control Z to backspace. I should probably show you the difference between an adjustment up under here. If I were to place a curve here, what it actually does is makes an adjustment directly to this layer, meaning that I could make adjustments to this layer and make my image do whatever I want. But when I say OK, it's going to be baked into this layer. And I don't necessarily like that. There are some times when I would use it, but most times I would not. So I'm going to just kind of go back here to my selective flatten image here, and let's go to here. Now, the first thing that we have available to us, pretty much standard nowadays for people is using generative fill and getting rid of things. But I would say, we could just as easily, instead of using generative fill, we could easily just come over here and just, select our stick that's bothering our eye and select this one. And all I'm using is, this tool here, which is the spot healing brush tool. Now, you could argue that maybe it didn't do such a great job there, and maybe if I went over it a couple times, I get a little bit better variations, but that's beside the point. What I really wanted to cover was this whole thought process of a curve. So I would apply a curve in a curves adjustment layer, which we can get from the bottom of our window here. And now I can easily just, brighten the whole image if I want. If I want to work on a specific tone, I can. We covered this in last week's class where I could just say, look, let's go ahead and apply a curve. And this time what I'm going to do is use my local node adjustment tool and say, for example, I would like these red hues. And you notice that it has picked a specific RGB value for those red hues, which again is really kind of handy because I can use that to say, look, let's go ahead and increase those red hues some more, and let's maybe worry about the blues. So I could come over to my blue channel and I could take and pull the blues and say, let's add a little more blue to this tricolor heron. And you see that it picked a totally different RGB value for this blue than it did for the reds or the maroons in that bird. So all of these things are great to have, and it's it's wonderful to see, but how does that relate to what we would like to do in Lightroom? Well, certainly we can use curves the same way in Lightroom. So let's just go back and I'm going to jump over to Lightroom here. And let's open up that same image. So I have the same image. I'm in the develop module. I'm going to just expand some things so we have a little more room with our screen. And now, if I were to say, look, I really want to make these same adjustments, I could go to my tone curve and I can say, look, let's go to the blue channel. Let's grab our local node adjustment. Let's add a little more blues to the blue. Let's go to the reds if I wanted to. It's a little different than what I did in the so I'm going to go to an RGB channel, and therefore I'll have the same effect that I did in Photoshop. And so that's the same technique in Lightroom. So no difference other than the fact that here we're building it into our Lightroom XMP file rather than building it into layers in Photoshop. However, where did the strength of all of this come from, and what can we do to even make this more powerful? So I'm going to jump back to Photoshop for a second, and I'm going to address something that came about a number of years ago. And don't ask me to tell you when, because it's the progression of Lightroom and Photoshop and what's happened. But years ago we started talking about luminosity masking. And luminosity masking became very, very powerful, and still is, because in fact it allows us to select a particular range of color or luminosity or color, and take and adjust, say, for example, the whites of the feathers and the belly of this tricolor. So one of the people that was on the forefront of this was a gentleman by the name of Tony Kuiper, who I highly regard and is a terrific programmer, photographer, editor. And so he created Tony Kuiper's actions, and rather than showing you all of that, I'm just going to switch over to my my favorite workspace. And in my workspace, you'll see that I have all of these Tony Kuiper's actions. And I'm going to ask you to just kind of ignore most everything over here, except for this little button right here. This little button right here allows me to take and make a luminosity mask of my image. And what do I mean by that? Well, a mask is essentially black and white. So we have the ability to white reveals and black conceals. And were I to just paint on this mask, if I were to grab a black brush and just paint on this mask, you would see that I could paint black. And as I paint black, it is going to prevent an adjustment from being seen because it is black. So what this actually is showing you using Tony Kuiper's actions is that it is showing you a mask, not the image, but a mask in gray tones. So where it is lighter, you can see it more. Where it is dark, the adjustment that I'm going to apply will not apply. So let's just try something really drastic, and I'm going to kind of come over here and choose a lights 3. So you see, all I do is just choose a lights on this panel. I'm going to choose a lights 3, and the lights 3 shows me the chest hair of the bird in white, and his feather on the back of his head, and a little bit under his jaw, a little bit on the bill. Now, I can adjust that through a whole series of different things, but I'm trying to keep this very simple. So if I just choose a 3, and then choose a curve, what it will do is create the mask. Do you see the mask over here? The mask is, and if I take and click on the mask and show you the mask, so there's the mask, and the mask is white reveals, black conceals. But you notice that it's not pure white and it's not pure black. There's all kinds of tonal gradations, which is a really powerful function of luminosity masking, is that I can take and really narrow down what adjustment I'm going to apply and where based upon those 255 tones of gray. So I go back to my adjustment, and now without choosing anything, I can just say I would like to brighten that white area of this tricolor heron. And that is pretty darn powerful, because you see what it's doing is just lightening the little bit of the beak, the hair here, and here it's controlled by this mask. So that being said, we go, all right, the next evolution of this is there are other ways to get luminosity masking. And the answer is yes. We can do luminosity masking in a number of different ways. We can do it using a specific mask. The other thing we could do is do it by blend if. So we have people like Blake Rudis, who's created a terrific program for doing blend if. Now, blend if is a little different, right? Let's just take and hide this for a second. Let's go ahead and create an adjustment layer. And let's go and just create a curves adjustment layer. And what I'm going to do is take and maximize a curve here. I'm just going to brighten this curve. So now I can do blend if, and I can double click on my layer and come up with my layer style sheet. And on this layer I could say, look, only show me this change in the darker areas of my image, or only affect the brightest portions of my image. So right now I'm affecting just the brightest portions of the image, and I have a transition across my darks. So it's not affecting the dark, it's affecting gradually through this area of gray tones, and it's affecting all of the whites. And that is a blend if methodology of dealing with luminosity range. And you go, okay, Doug, but you know, this is terrific. This seems a little too complicated to me, and you know, thanks for the introduction, but no thanks. It's kind of like I was watching a program the other day on astrophysics, and 15-20 minutes into this PhD astrophysics professor talking about neutrinos and astrophysics, I was like, all right, you know, like, talk about a deer in the headlights. I said, I think I got to step out of this program. Now, I'm hoping you're not there with me yet, but this is a thought process, right? Now let's go and take a look at Lightroom. In Lightroom, things are a little bit different. What I'm going to do is just to reset to take us back to our last position here. And then what I'm going to do is, just because these sticks are bothering me, I'm going to just get rid of these sticks quickly. And let's go ahead and talk about what I really want to talk about, which is using our new masking function. So I'm over here in the masking function, and I want to use this new masking function to kind of do the same thing that I did with luminosity masking in a curve in Photoshop. Now, whether I'm using luminosity masking, whether I'm using blend if in Photoshop, the Lightroom equivalent is to use something called our range and go to a luminance range. And so now we get this kind of, you know, unusual looking bar of saying, you know, here's our luminance range. So let's say I want to just affect the whites again. I can take my luminance range and slide my main bar over, and then I can also take and slide off a feather, so I can feather this. So let's go ahead and feather this so that I get just about what I had in my Tony Kuiper's. Now it's not quite as constrained as what Tony Kuiper's is, because my range is a little bit greater. So I'm going to keep trying to narrow this down until I get to this narrow little range, this is pretty darn close to what we had with luminosity masking using Tony Kuiper's techniques. Now, we can always refine this mask a little bit. For example, I could come up to my mask and let's just say subtract with a brush, and I'm going to get a little bit bigger brush, and I'm just going to say, you know, I really don't need that affected. I don't need these twigs affected down here, or his leg. And so I'm just refining the mask a little bit, saying, look, I want to make things a little bit whiter, a little bit brighter, but I would like to kind of constrain it to, you know, to this area. So Now we just have our bird, a little bit of our bill, our back feathers, and showing in green. Now, some people might ask me, well, how'd you get the green? And that's basically over here in these three little dots. These three little dots allow us to change, first of all, the color overlay. My personal favorite is color overlay on black and white. But you could set it as color overlay, and it's going to show you just that lime green on the color image. You could set it as image on black and white, and then it's going to just show you where the changes are going to occur, which is hard for me to see, so I don't prefer that one. I can say image on black, and now it's going to show me just my mask. Again, kind of like what we would be looking at as a mask in Lightroom, or I mean in Photoshop. My personal preference is still going to be color overlay on black. And then I can choose whatever color I want here as well. So I could just choose the reds, or I could choose whatever color I like. I personally just like this green. I think it's effective on a lot of images. So that's how I get the show overlay. Now, let's just turn show overlay off for a second, and let's look at our adjustments. So our mask is in place. If I hover over the mask, you can see the mask that I have. And now, all I need to do is say, look, let's open up the whites in that mask area. And you can see what I can do as far as controlling the highlights and the whites on that tricolor heron. So this is the technique that we use in Lightroom rather than using luminosity masking in Photoshop. Now, just to take this one step further, I'm going to jump back over to Photoshop for a second. I'm going to turn this off. And what I'm going to do is go to, say, for example, a mask. Again, I'm going to Tony Kuiper's masking option. And I'm going to choose a mid-tone. So these are the mid-tones, 1, 2, and 3. So if I go to a 3 mid-tone, you'll see that the white is going to accept my adjustment. The black is going to conceal my adjustment. So white reveals, black conceals. And now I can go ahead and go and apply, say, a curve. Let's apply a curve. And if I apply that curve, I can then take and just adjust the midtones. So I'm able to say, bring and exaggerate those midtone colors, and yet it's not clipping badly my whites. It's not pushing my whites bad one way or another. So this is a midtone adjustment. Now the way that we do a midtone adjustment in Lightroom is very similar. We use the luminosity mask. So let's go and create a new mask and go to the luminance range. Except that, remember, my luminance range, I want it to be just in the midtones. So what I'm going to do is pull both ends of this in. And in this case, I'm going to show it to you on image. So here we have a similar effect. So the mask, you notice that the mask is a little cruder. The edges are a little sharper. We see some pixelization along the edges. All of that is because of this feathering. So I could feather this more and say, let's narrow this down to just the narrow mid-range tone and feather it more. And we'll see that it still has some pixelization, but it's becoming a little more gradual transitions between the blacks and the grays. But this is the equivalent of grabbing a mid-tone in Tony Kuiper's in Photoshop. Now you notice that it's not quite as clean as what Photoshop can do. But this is the first iteration, really, of these masking techniques. So I expect this to improve with future editions of Lightroom. But now, if we were to say, okay, turn this overlay off, and then I come back down here and I choose a curve for my adjustment, I can do the same type of effects that I just did in Photoshop. So the advantage of Lightroom is that it's fast and easy. We can do basically all the luminosity masking that we want in Lightroom using just the new luminosity range version. However, I will tell you that the Photoshop versions of this, if we were to just look at this mask, look at the smooth transitions that we have here, looking at this mid-tone range. Do you notice that it's quite a bit smoother, quite a bit less pixelated? But this is the equivalent. This is a mid-tone mask using Tony Kuiper and a curve to adjust the midtones, and we've done the exact same thing over here in Lightroom. I wanted to kind of give you this thought process of how this transition happened. What progressed in photo editing that gave us the impetus to even have luminosity range available in Lightroom. And that luminosity range in Lightroom is key to doing some of the great editing that we would like to do. So I hope this has helped you a little bit. Follow me every Tuesday. We're doing Transform Tuesdays. If you go to handsgate.com, my website, you can get information on there about additional classes that I teach and workshops that I'm running around the country. Feel free to reach out to me at any time and ask me questions. Ask questions on YouTube, or private message me, or email me. My email's on the website as well, and I'll include it in information below this YouTube channel. Hope this helped you at all, and we'll talk to you soon.